This is Marie Gasper-Hulvat.
Juli-Ann Gasper.
And we are sitting in the lobby of the Tretiakov Gallery in Moscow, Russia. We are sitting in the lobby because we were just in the church of the Tretiakov Gallery, which has in its walls and inside of the church is the icon of the Vladimir Mother of God. And we just went there and saw it.
We didn't really want to talk there because it's a working church.
Yes.
There were worshipers there.
It felt very awkward to want to record there, so we are now looking at a postcard of the same icon that we bought in the gift shop, and we're going to talk a little bit about it in a way that doesn't feel too invasive of people's worshiping experience. Because this icon is still a very valid expression of people's faith, and it is not just an art object, it is an object that is part of an act of religion.
It's very clear it's not just an art object because it's not in the museum.
It's not
in the church.
There are several rooms with icons that are in the museum itself, and this particular icon, amongst all of the amazing and ancient, very old icons that are in this collection, that one has been put in the church. And I suspect that it looked like there was an outside entrance. One didn't need to pay admission to go into the church to see this icon.
So why is this icon so special?
That's a good question. This icon was effectively became the Palladium of Russia, is a term that I've heard it called. It became the symbol of the Russian church, the Russian nation, from about the 15th century into the 19th century.
The Mother of God is holding Jesus in her hands. You can see both of her hands, and you can see his feet and his hands, and their two faces.
Now this icon was not made in Russia. This icon was made in Constantinople in the 12th century, or late 11th century, and was brought to Russia, given by the Byzantine ambassadors to the Russian prince that was then in Kiev, was where it was brought to. This icon then was moved as the center of power in Russia moved north from Kiev to Vladimir and Suzdal, and then from Vladimir and Suzdal moved slightly to the west and north to Moscow. This icon moved with the power. At least that's the story that the Muscovites, the people that lived in Moscow, told. That was the story that they created to show that power was holy, and that holy power moved with this particular icon. So Moscow tried to establish itself in the 15th and 16th centuries as the city that had inherited the power and glory of Constantinople. Constantinople fell for the last time and never again regained its Christian status in 1453. And so when that happened, Moscow was effectively the only sovereign nation left on earth that still held Orthodoxy as its national religion. So Russia with Moscow at its head.
And this icon was the symbol of that power.
Exactly. So this icon became extremely important for national identity as in terms of being ruled by Moscow. And at the same point in time, as Moscow was trying to establish itself as inheritor of the Byzantine legacy, it was also consolidating its power over a variety of other city-states surrounding it, so that Moscow at this point in time becomes the leader of Russia over the other cities. So this icon points to that as well, that consolidation of power, not only of the holy power that comes from the other nations, but of its power within its own nation.
I noticed as we walked through the icon gallery that there were several images that are very similar to this. They look like they were copies, perhaps.
They are. This icon was copied many, many times because it is the palladium of the Russian state in terms of as an Orthodox country. In fact, we saw yesterday at the Dormition Cathedral within the Kremlin of Moscow a very famous copy of this particular icon that was used in place of this icon effectively. This icon, the one we are looking at the postcard of right now, not the one we're looking at now, but the postcard, its home was the Dormition Cathedral in the Kremlin, the Moscow Kremlin, for hundreds of years.
Because that's where the center of the church power was. Exactly.
The replica that is in the Uspensky, the Dormition Cathedral now, is a very important copy of it. It was okay to copy icons. A copy of an icon is as effective as the original that it was copied from.
Because they're both images.
And every image is a copy of the original prototype. The original prototype being Mary in flesh and blood. Mary in flesh and blood was the original image from which a painter took a copy. And so that is what is being accessed through all of these copies, is her actual flesh and blood that could be seen by the human eye. That's the original. Although this image, this picture, well, this copy of this icon that we're looking at, the postcard, is just as valid in terms of showing that image of her body.
So if I did not have access to the real icon in the temple here
in the church,
museum, this copy, which I'm holding, could serve as my worship center.
Theoretically.
And as well as all the other copies around Russia and around the world.
That is in theory how the theology works. Now, whether or not individual believers would acquiesce to that is debatable. One thing that becomes particularly notable about this icon, this physical object that is in the church up above us, is that it had many miracles attributed to it. So the physical object of this particular wooden board created numerous miracles which saved the city of Moscow from a number of different attackers. And so that added some sort of special, almost relic nature to this board. That specific piece of wood
which the copies don't have.
Which the copies don't have in the same way. They have access to it in terms of the fact that they're copies of it, but there's something particularly special about this really ancient icon. So why is this icon in the Tretiakov Gallery and up above us in the church that it's in now?
I have no idea.
Well, when the revolution happened in 1917,
this was the October Revolution?
The October Revolution, when the communists came to power, they were quite diligent about wanting to preserve and maintain and restore the artistic heritage of Russia. And by doing such activities, they pulled most of the important icons, the historically significant icons, out of the churches as art objects and put them into museums. So that's how it ended up at the Tretiakov Gallery, is through this process of reclamation and restoration. Because under the communists, especially at the beginning of the communist regime, the church was outlawed. They turned churches into grain storage bins. Priests were arrested. It was illegal to be a Christian.
But they still valued the art.
But they still value them as art objects. So therefore, they were studied in a scientific manner and not worshipped or venerated.
We've seen several places where the sign in front of something said it had been scientifically restored.
Yes, that's very much part of the idea of treating them as art historical objects rather than religious objects. So it's an interesting state of affairs that this object is now back in a temple, in a house of worship. And it's a reflection of the state of the church and the power of the church in Russia today, as opposed to what it was 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, under the communist rule. It is now acceptable that this is an object of worship, but is still in a museum.